Let me know if you can see my screen. Yeah, participants can see my
Yes.
screen now. Okay.
Yeah.
So yesterday we looked at some of the BA techniques, acceptance and evaluation criteria, and then backlog management, balance scorecard. Then we looked at example of balance scorecard, mind mapping, concept model, then interface analysis. Okay, so the next technique is financial analysis. I think Vijay or somebody was asking about, so what are the different financial parameters that we need to calculate, right? So this is something where we'll cover some of the financial parameters that we need to do. Okay, so a lot of times, if especially if you're not from finance background, right, you may not. There's very high probability that you may not have heard of any of this. Okay, so financial analysis is just a, basic concept where you when you're working on a change or when you're working on a new requirement, right, or a new product. So often you need to see and ascertain what are the costs versus benefits, right? And you need to look at return on investment before you make a decision, correct? So which is why a business analyst should be aware of basic financial analysis so that you can make prudent judgments, right? So financial analysis is about understanding the financial aspects of an investment, a solution, or a solution approach. Okay, so that's the fundamental of it. So as business analysts, so we use financial analysis to recommend a solution for an investment in a specific change. Okay, so we use financial analysis to compare one solution with another solution. Okay, so here we look at what is the initial cost, time frame in which these costs are incurred, the expected financial benefits, ongoing costs, and all of that. Okay. So even if you're not from finance background, right? So don't be overwhelmed because so you won't encounter anything new other than what we're discussing in this meeting. So if you just know these financial terms, right, that should be more than enough for you to get over with financial analysis. Okay. So, so when we are looking at the financial analysis, right, the basic concept is so we understand what is the cost of the change. Uh, and so cost, when we look at cost of change, so what is the initial cost and what is the ongoing cost? Someone has a question?
No, Ravi.
Okay. So when we look at cost, right, so uh, there are two types of costs. One is the initial investment cost, and the other is ongoing cost. So let's say, for example, let's say you purchased a television, okay, and because you want to watch Netflix on it, okay, so you let's assume that you paid 60,000 to buy the television, okay. So that 60,000 is called as OPEX. Okay, so POPEX is nothing but pre-operating expenditure. Okay, and then but every month you have to pay like 1,000 rupees, let's say, for Netflix, right, to maintain what you're seeing. So this is called OPEX. Okay, okay, so this is again a simple example, but if you look at from a software perspective, right, for example, if you're setting up a new product, you have to pay license for that product, right? So license is like normally one-time fee. License is for a longer duration, let's say like 5 years. Okay, you pay license for 5 years. That is called POPEX, and the ongoing support that the vendor is providing to you, right? You pay support costs on a regular basis, on a yearly basis. That is called OPEX. Okay, so when you think of cost, you should always look at POPEX and OPEX. OPEX is operating expenditure. POPEX is pre-operating expenditure. Simple. Okay, and so total cost of ownership, right? So TCO stands for total cost of ownership. And so this is a very commonly used abbreviation. So you should know that TCO stands for total cost ownership. So the total cost ownership includes both OPEX and OPEX. Okay, that's a simple way to explain it.
So
And
this is the capital cost, Ravi. OPEX is.
sorry, what is it?
We also called capital expenditure instead of OPEX.
Yeah, so yeah, capex, you can also call it as capex as well. Some organization call it capex as well, so you can call it opex as well. Yeah, yeah. But opex is same. So opex is like something you incur regularly. This is more of like a one time or a 5-year cost, for example. Okay, then so as a business analyst, so we will be working on various calculations, right? So the next one is return on investment. So return on investment. So you must have worked on, you must have heard of it before, I'm sure. So what is return on investment? So return on investment is the total benefits, okay, minus cost of investment by cost of investment. Okay, so it's nothing but your net return by cost of investment. Okay, so it's a simple formula, right? So higher the rate ROI or higher the return on investment, the better the solution. Okay, so when making a comparison between potential investments, right? So we as business analysts use the same time period for both and then compare the return on investment. Okay, the other thing that you need to look at is we need to look at net present value as well. So, so you need to look at, so what is present value? So present value is, so when you discount some future benefits to the present date, right? So that is called the net present value. Okay, so then this again has a mathematical formula.
Ravi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I go ahead? Yeah, where does this financial analysis fit into Agile? Is it at the initial time or during each sprints?
That's a good question, actually. So in when you're following Scrum, right, you need to kind of use these financial analysis on an ongoing basis. For example, we looked at, we add the value that is that each feature is delivering, right? So we use value as one of the parameters for prioritization, correct? So value is nothing but return on investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ROI is a way you can calculate, or NPV, the net present value, is a way of calculating value. Okay, or payback period is also a way of calculating value. So we keep, so there is in Agile a lot more, there is a lot more focus on financial analysis.
Okay, it depends on priority and value to the business each sprint.
Yeah, so value that we are generating, so return on investment that we are generating for every change. Okay, so but don't get confused about financial analysis more, which is a broader concept, right? Where you have to go and analyze income statements, balance sheets, and also that financial analysis is totally different. So as business analysts, so we are only interested in parameters or financial concepts where we measure value. Okay, so if you look at each of these, right, so these are like more on what is the cost, what is the investment, what is the return. Okay, so we are focused more on those kind of formulas.
Okay.
Okay, so
Is this business alone has responsibility in doing this financial analysis, or it's like a development team is also contributing to this?
Development team may not, but you will work very closely with product owner. If you have a product owner, right, he will take care of this.
Yeah.
You don't need to do it.
Oh,
But
okay.
a lot of times you have budget issues, right? So you may need to play the role of a product owner also.
Okay.
Okay, so present value is nothing but just the sum of net benefits in that period by 1 plus discount rate. Okay, so this is just the formula to compute the present value. So for example, what is worth in future, right? So let's say 1,000 rupees, which is worth in future, it need not be like 1,000 rupees today, right? So it will be somewhere around 900 where you discount it. Right? So you calculate the discount rate, you use the discount rate to calculate the present value, and the discount rate is nothing but your risk-free interest rate. So typically the interest rate on government bonds. Okay, so that is the rate that you will use to compute. And
Basically,
so
this is adjusting inflation, right?
yeah, you're right. Okay, so the next one is NPV. So NPV is nothing but once you calculate the present value, right? So you do a difference of present value minus your cost of your investment. Okay, so that gives the net present value. Higher the net present value, the better the investment. Okay. So you need, when you have to compare multiple solutions. So in interview, people may ask you, so when you have multiple solutions, right? So how do you make a decision? Which one is good? Okay, then you need to explain. So I look at what is the total cost of ownership. I look at what is the return on investment, what is the NPV, what is the PV. Okay, and you can explain all these financial analysis. So the next one is IRR. IRR stands for internal rate of return. Okay, so it is the interest rate at which an investment breaks even. Okay, and where you start making profits. Okay, so that's the IRR. Okay, so then again IRR has a formula where so so it's something like this. I'll share you a list of all the formulas, so you don't need to make a note of it. So when the time comes, you can just refer to that spreadsheet to calculate. Okay, so so NPV equals to what? So it is -1 into original investment plus sum of net benefits by 1 plus IRR. So this is the interest rate. So in this formula, so you need to put NPV as 0, okay, because we are talking of break even, right? So that means your NPV will be 0. So when you put NPV as 0 and then you calculate when you submit all the other values, right? So the original investment and the net benefits, you will get what is the IRR. So IRR is the rate at which your investment breaks even. Okay, so that means you have recovered your investment and whatever you get after that is your profit. Okay, and the last one we look at is payback period. So payback period is something that provides projection on the time period required to generate benefits. Okay, so after how many years will we generate profit? Okay, so is it like 3 years or 5 years or 10 years? Okay, and to recover the cost. So once the payback period has passed, the initiative or the project would normally show a net financial benefit. So you will start getting profits. Okay. So that's on the financial analysis. For people from non-finance background, right, it could be overwhelming, but trust me, so if you understand these 5 concepts, right, your life will be like really easy. So this is how you measure value. Okay, it's not that complicated. So I can share you the formulas and then you can refer. Any questions before we move to the next technique?
Ravi, just trying to understand like how significant is this financial analysis is. So as I've already said that for each project there's a fixed budget. So let's say for sprint, different backlogs requirements are added, and for each time, do we need to do financial analysis because budget need to require more for adding more backlog?
Sorry, so budget is
Did you get
okay.
my point? Or?
No, I didn't get your point. So let me rephrase if I understood you correctly. So you are saying is anyway, what the budget that we get is already decided, right? So we have the funding already in place.
Yeah, decided.
So why should we do financial analysis? Is that right? Is that
Yeah,
your
because
question?
as the project moves on, yeah.
Mm.
So just adding one more point to that question. So as the project moves on, requirements are also getting added to the product backlog. So as the requirements are added, even budget also get increased, right?
Yeah, so we are not talking of budget. So your budget is, or you already have the investment. So with that, in given the same amount of investment, how can you maximize your profit? That's what we are. That's why we are looking at the financial analysis, right? So optimize your
Okay,
investment.
okay, okay. Now,
How can you optimize your investment to generate more value for business?
okay, okay.
Yeah.
My God.
When we
Okay.
talk about Agile Bird, do we have fixed bid project in Agile Bird as well?
Actually, that's a good question again. So that in reality, right? So we have fixed capacity. So we have fixed in what do you say? Fixed capacity and fixed price. Yeah. So we have fixed capacity, fixed price as well. Though it doesn't work like really well, Vijay, but when you work with vendors, right? So often you get into these contracts, okay? Fixed capacity and fixed price both. Okay. So in fact, in one of the projects that I worked on previously, so we had the payments linked to velocity. Okay, so you commit certain story points and then you deliver certain story points, right? So the ratio of what you commit to what you deliver should be greater than 80%. Okay, then the project is successful, which is not a really right way of measurement. But sometimes contracts are made even before you join, and then it's very difficult to change contracts, right? Okay, so anyway, we'll keep moving. So the next technique is focus groups. Let's see, some people have joined. Okay, so the next.
Ravi, this other joined.
Hi,
Sorry.
hi, Kadar. Yeah, no worries. So the next one is focus groups. So Kadar, we just discussed few of the techniques, so financial analysis. The next one is focus groups. So focus groups is again common technique that we use as business analysts. Okay, so normally, so we'll see what is focus group. So focus group is a group of 3 to 12 participants, and so where you lead a discussion about a set of topics, and so you give like verbal and written feedback through discussion and exercises in this group. Okay, the main purpose of focus group is to draw and understand the attitudes, feelings, beliefs, experiences, and reactions of the participants in so which would not be feasible using other methods like, for example, observation or one-to-one interviewing or questionnaire or surveys. Okay, so that's where focus group really plays a vital role. So focus group requires a really experienced business analyst to guide discussions and to encourage participants to get involved. Okay, and so we need to be really skilled in managing and guiding this group without influencing the course of the discussion. Okay, so and sorry, so you will so in the focus group, so you'll be focusing on revealing hidden emotions, internal conflicts, okay, and trying to understand what are the attitudes and opinions. Okay, so that's what focus group is more about. And so you must be thinking, so why focus group? So focus group is used to gather like opinions and attitudes about, let's say, certain products or services or concepts. Okay, so where you want to gather like focused feedback. So it's also used when you want to test out ideas and gather opinions on whether the idea will be liked or needed by the target audience. That's also when you use focus group. So it can really provide valuable insight into what your users or audience is thinking. Okay, and you can use focus group early in the project life cycle to explore options and formulate new ideas. So that's when you can use focus groups. And so if you want to use focus group in later in the process, so you can use it to validate concepts, or when you want to choose between two different prototypes, right, or two different designs before launch, so you can use a focus group discussion as well. So how do you measure the success of a focus group? So how do you know whether your focus group discussion went well? So it's when you are able to gather like really qualitative data that indicates that the problems or concepts you are looking to solve are worth pursuing. Okay, so when you are able to make a decision, right, on what you intend to be the outcome, so that's when it's a successful one. Okay, and normally you so the suggested time would be like, so you have um, like it could range from 1 to 2 hours. This is excluding your preparation time. Okay, and the ideal team size would be anywhere between 3 to 12 people. Okay, so again, some of the best practices would be um, a focus group discussion is not more like an interview session where you would be guiding the interview, right? So you would be decide carefully asking intelligent questions and then guiding through the course of the discussion, right? So whereas the focus group is more like a discussion during which you collect feedback. Okay, so you will not be guiding the course of the discussion. Okay, so you'll be just telling the problem statement or telling the concept or product or idea, and you'll be collecting feedback from users. Okay, so for example, I normally use focus group discussions to get feedbacks on the design. Okay, so once let's say we are developing um, um, web application, and then we have created some mock screens. Okay, so what we do is, so we explain the scenario or use case so we bring a multiple set of users from diverse backgrounds into the focus group discussion. Then we ask the users to play around with the prototypes. Okay, and then give feedback on the prototype. So that will help us understand the pain points. Okay, so that's one use case where I normally use focus groups. Okay, and so it's a good technique to understand a lot of things. Um, the only con would be where it involves like 3 to 12 people, right? Sometimes if you're not able to moderate the discussion well, or if you're not able to, you know, get good feedback or generate good feedback out of it, right? So it's more like, the cost is immense because you have like 3 to 12 people involved in that 1 hour meeting. So it could turn out to be an expensive meeting.
So Ravi, can we correlate this technique when we do internal UAT? Because generally, what we do, we I mean, share the final software to the internal group and get the feedback.
Yeah, this is a pretty good use case. So where you want to walk through, let's say like where you want the users to experience, right, without you guiding what is the functionality. That's a good good case actually. So the thumb rule is in focus group, right? You don't talk much in the focus group. You just explain the concept or idea that you want to achieve, and you let the people whom you have selected to talk. Okay, so you will be collecting feedback from them.
So basically, it's a, I mean, in initial phase, right?
Yeah, yeah,
not
initial phase, or maybe more like when you're in the design phase, collecting feedback so that you avoid surprises and you don't handhold the users in the focus group discussion. So that's the major difference to other elicitation techniques. So here you will just leave the user just like how they work in production scenario, right? So they will be working independently. You will leave the user, so you'll just explain the concept and idea and take feedback.
okay. But don't you have to walk them through your idea, like why you are building this?
Yeah, so the reason we don't walk through is because, see, a lot of times what happens is, let's say for example you are working on a startup idea. So I'm just coming out of the technology world. Let's say you're working on a startup idea. Okay, so you will say, okay, I'm going to start um, start a business to deliver birthday gifts. Okay, and then you go and talk to your friend. I'm going to create an app where people can order birthday gifts and then I can deliver. So when you say that, right, people are normally inclined or keen to give you positive feedback because they don't want you to be unhappy, correct?
Right.
Because when you're telling that, okay, this is my idea, obviously people will not tell that, okay, um, it's not good, or they'll be hesitant to give you negative feedback. So which is why we take them into the room, so we avoid talking about the idea or concept too much. We just tell, okay, so we focus on the problem that we are trying to solve. Okay, so for example, let's say uh, let's say you design a screen, you design like multiple UI screens, mock-up screens to transfer funds. Okay, then what you do is you get into the focus group discussion, you bring different types of users, and then show them these screens. Okay, so can you transfer, so these are the screens to transfer funds, so can you transfer funds and tell us your experience? Okay,
Okay.
so you avoid talking like too much details. So you avoid telling that, okay, so we have carefully added this field here. So we have carefully put the submit button here at the bottom right, so that it will be easy for you to when you're navigating. So you avoid telling all that, guiding the user in the discussion. Okay, so you leave it as a surprise and let the user give you feedback.
All right. Suppose I'm just giving you one example. Suppose we build up a cognos report, okay,
Hmm.
and we have invited couple of people, a few from ongoing and few from implementation.
Hmm.
Okay, and before showing that report to the client, so we can show them this is a solution that we built up. Okay.
Yeah, correct. And so just show the report to them and ask them to interpret how the report is, what is there in the report. Okay. So otherwise, if you guide them, right, if you guide them that okay, so second column is this one, third column is this one, to generate this value, you have to drag this formula, right? Then you will be telling only to like 3 to 12 people who are there in the FGD. But what about the thousands of other people who will be using your Cognos report,
Right.
right? So it's a good way to understand why and how and gain insights into customer problems and empathize with the real problems that the customers are facing. So that's where this technique stands out. I found it quite handy in getting actual real feedback from customers. Okay, so the next technique is root cause analysis. So this is something that you must have done like day in and day out, right? So whenever you have a problem, it could be a production incident, or it could be an issue that you're facing in tests. It could be a defect or any business problem. So you can use root cause analysis to dig deeper and then understand. So there are two famous root cause techniques. So one is the fishbone diagram, and then the other one is the 5 whys. Okay. So 5 whys is nothing but so where you keep asking why 5 times till you get to the root of the problem. Okay. And the fishbone technique is something like this, where you try to understand the root cause, okay, of the problem. Okay, so we'll look at a simple example on the fishbone diagram. So you can draw a diagram like this, and then so you have the uh, so the step one is where you're capturing the issue or problem under discussion. So you'll be writing the problem statement as the heading, and then so you draw the diagonal lines from the, so this is the spine, right? So you draw the spine first, and then you draw the diagonal lines from the spine to represent categories of potential causes of the problem. Okay, so these are like category 1 or category 2, 3, 4. Okay, so you represent the categories using these diagonal lines drawn out from the spine. And then you draw like smaller lines to represent like deeper causes here. So these are the deeper causes. And then and then you draw the lines. So if these causes have like sub causes, right? So these are like the secondary causes, and these are like the tertiary causes. Okay, so they could be like sub causes of one cause, right? So then this is when you analyze the results and brainstorm on these different causes to find out what is the real problem. This is quite self-explanatory technique, but we'll quickly take a look at a simple diagram to understand. Just give me a second. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so for example, let's say users are complaining that there is slowness in your application. Okay, so now you draw the spine. So you put the problem here, and then you draw the spine, and then you draw the diagonal lines out of the spine. So what are the potential reasons for this slowness? Okay, you brainstorm and then you come up with, okay, so it could be an issue related to hardware. Okay, or it could be an issue related to the software or the program that you've created. It could be related to the environment, or it could be related to the users. Okay, so then for each of these, so you write what are the causes. So hardware, it could be like your application server is slow. Okay, for example, or your another hardware could be your database server can be slow. Software is, okay, so maybe like too many multitasking processes running in parallel. Okay, could be one way, or it could be that too much logging, too many logs. So you've added like too many logs in the software, so which is slowing down the application. So likewise, you update like what are the different causes for each of them, and then you finalize what is the actual root cause for this problem. Okay, so this is one of the techniques. 5 whys is also a good technique. So you break it, you keep asking like why 5 times till you reach to the solution. Okay, so this is the next technique is the stakeholder list map or personas. So this is something we discussed previously, but so you create. So this is where you list out all your stakeholders and then you fit in each of your stakeholders in one of the four quadrants. So this is something we discussed previously. So on the x-axis, you demonstrate what is the stakeholder interest for your project, okay, and what is the stakeholder influence, and you put each of them into these four quadrants, okay. So the focus is mainly on the stakeholder who has like high interest, okay, and high influence, okay. So you monitor them closely, and people who have high interest and high influence and low interest, right? So you ensure they are satisfied because they can spoil your project anytime, okay. And people who have like low interest and low influence, so you don't need to bother much about that. Only thing is you need to focus, you need to make sure they don't spill into like other quadrants from here to here or here, okay. As long as they are in this quadrant, you don't need to give them much attention, okay. Whereas people who have like high interest and low influence, right, these are like super excited people who are extremely supportive of your project, so keep them informed so that they remain motivated. Any questions? So this is a pretty common one, and so this is something you can use to explain when you're explaining, so what are the typical activities you will perform when you start in a new project as a BA.
So Ravi, this techniques comes under personas.
Yeah, because you're defining the user personas, right? And then mapping them into the quadrants.
Okay.
Ravi, what was your question earlier?
My question?
Like, internet got disconnected, so I
Okay.
heard someone asking something. So
No. Okay. So on the personas, so do we also take care of the personas here? So this is what we are doing, right? So by understanding each different
okay,
personas,
yeah,
we are mapping them. Yeah.
thanks, yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so this is the most commonly used technique. So you must have heard of like use cases and scenarios, right? Very commonly we create UML diagrams, and then one of the commonly used UML diagrams is use case and scenarios. So anyone already created these in their projects?
No.
No? Okay. Yeah, no worries. So a use case is typically used to explain the interaction between a user and the system. Okay, so when you want to explain the interaction between different users and the system, right? That's when we use use case. Okay, so when we are looking at use cases, right? So there are like different things that we need to do, that we need to understand. Um, so you have an actor here, and then the most confused uh, thing here is the relationship. Okay, so there are two types of relationships. One is extends and the other is includes. Okay, so extends you use, so when you want to insert an additional behavior into a use case, right, then you use extends. Okay, but whereas when you want to when you allow for the use case to make use of the functionality present in another use case, then you use includes. Okay, so this is a very important interview question as well. So if somebody is asking you about use cases, right, they will ask you about what is the difference between extends and includes. If you're confused, I can explain one more time.
So as far as include is concerned, we are just including if we are picking functionality from the other use case, right?
No. So I'll also explain you with an example, but extends is when you have one use case and you want the other you want the insertion of additional behavior into a use case which is not mandatory. Okay, then you use extends. Okay, but you use includes when you want each time this use case is executed, right? It has to make use of this use case. Then you use includes. So in includes, this when this use case is executed, this one should also be executed. Okay, but whereas in extends, this can exist in isolation. This is a nice to have use case.
Oh,
Yeah. So we'll look at a simple example.
Ravi, this is you're talking in perspective of waterfall method, right? Use case scenarios.
You may need to create use case in Agile also if it helps. Okay, so the concept of Agile is people may say, okay, no documentation in Agile, but let's say if your documentation is helping, right, there's no harm in creating. Okay, so but use case diagrams you can create in Agile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just trying to understand while we create user stories, then what is the need for use cases? Does it make any kind of duplication or it is an additional addition
This
to
is
the?
like a visual representation, right? So use cases you will be using like even after your project goes live, but user stories, there is no real use after your project is completed. Okay. So for
Because I
example,
read somewhere meaning it both commonly denote like user interacts with the system, use case and user stories. So that's where I got confused. Like how we have to differentiate
the
between both of them.
user story is exactly, what the user wants. Okay. But whereas use case often explains system interaction. Okay. So in a user story, you won't find like system interaction. So for example, I'll give you a simple use case here. I'm showing it to you. So you have a trader, okay? So this trader is called an actor in a use case, okay? So you have two actors. So you have one trader and then you have an operator here, okay?
Okay.
So let's say the trader has to book a trade, okay? So this is the book a trade.
Okay.
Or maybe let's say something like trader logs in, okay? Logs into the application, for example. Okay, then he goes and books a trade. Okay, then this booking a trade so can extend something, right? So I'm not sure if everyone is following this trade and terminology. If you don't understand, probably I can give you a simple explanation as well.
Yeah, Ravi, this is little bit
Okay.
different.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I'll use something simple. So let's say you look at the same net banking application, right? So you have a customer logged into net banking. Okay. So customer logs into net banking, right? So then he has to transfer funds. Okay. So when you have to transfer funds, then what is like mandatory to check? Okay. Uh, the
Amount availability.
Yeah, correct. So when you have to check like amount, balance, available balance, right? Okay. So should we check like every time this balance is available, right? We need to check, right? It should be includes, right? Because every time we transfer funds, available balance use case should be executed, correct?
Yes.
Is it making sense? Just increasing the font. Okay, whereas, so whenever you're checking available balance, right? Maybe something like send text message, send an SMS when balance is low. Okay, so this one, this one is an example of extends, because we send this message SMS only when the balance is low, right? So that means it need not be executed every time. Okay, so it's executed, we send message only when the balance is low. So this is a classic example of extends. Okay, so that's the difference between an includes and an extends. Okay, so then so let's say you have another actor who will be, let's say someone like admin. Okay, so admin could be like responding whenever there is low balance, right? So the admin can respond, so something like that. So this is a typical use case, so where you have actors, use cases, and then you develop relationships. In relationships you have like two major, includes and extends.
Okay.
Okay.
So Ravi, how in words, how do we differentiate it? If we put this example, include and extends, how do we differentiate it in words?
So when somebody asks you in interview,
Yes, yes.
okay, so when somebody asks you in interview, right? So difference between extends. So extends is so when I have a use case and I want to insert additional behavior into a use case, I use extends. Okay, and the use case that is being extended must be completely functional on its own. Okay, and must not be dependent on the extending use case. Correct. So that's when I use extends. Whereas includes, so when you want to allow for the use case to make use of functionality present in another use case, then you use includes. The included use case does not need to be a complete use case in its own right. Okay, so but it's triggered whenever the main use case is triggered.
Okay.
To put it simply, so extends is like the extended use case is optional, includes is included use case is mandatory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And include is means kind of dependent, and extend is not dependent
Yeah.
on the primary one.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So Ravi, sorry, the use case is generally, if I understand, is made in the beginning phases. It's like because we are trying to understand uh, the user and its interaction with the system.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So whenever we are developing a new software or platform, right, that's when we create a lot of
In the
use.
designing phase,
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, correct. Yeah.
And Ravi, as you said, like as far as user stories is concerned, we don't use it in the future, right?
Hmm.
Suppose we got a bug in ongoing. So does we, I mean, go back and check the user stories?
No,
Okay.
no, because see that's not the intention. Okay, so intention is not we don't create user story so that, okay, so we go and check. It's not like a typical BRD,
Mhm.
but let's say, but in sometimes what happens is you may enter into like fixed contracts with external vendors where you may write like very rigid acceptance criteria that is not non-negotiable. That's when you may go and check when your contracts include penalties and all of that, right? That's when you may go and check acceptance criteria. But normally Agile or Scrum is not very suitable for such fixed term contracts. But in reality, it can happen that people can go and charge penalties based on the acceptance criteria.
Okay. So like, I mean, initially when we just developing the product or services, they, I mean, sign off based on the user story. But later point of time, suppose there was an enhancement or or they want to, they created a bug. They are, this is not working. So don't we go back and see if it's an enhancement or original slippage from the requirement?
The focus is not given too much on whether it's a real defect or an original slippage, okay, unless you are not in a fixed term contract. Okay, so even if it's a slippage or a new one, right, it had gone through like multiple checkpoints, right? So who is responsible? So is a BA responsible because a BA clearly wrote the user story and acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is readied by the end user. I've demoed the result in the sprint demo to the end user, right? So the end user accepted the sprint demo. So who should be blamed for this? So that's
Right.
why
Don't
we
we do,
don't
do the root cause analysis then, and
very,
uh,
I mean, we don't invest that much of effort in identifying like in traditional waterfall. So we keep moving on.
okay, then we create another
Yeah,
user story and add to the bank.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so vendor assessment is again an important technique. Monica, who's on the call, she was recently asked, how do you assess vendors? Okay, so very commonly asked interview question again. uh, so when you assess vendors, right? So you are actually uh, assessing their ability to meet commitments, okay, regarding delivery of your product or service, right? So we normally include vendors in involve them in design, construction, implementation, or maintenance, and different things. Okay, um, so we we normally use vendors when we don't have the capability within our organization, or maybe we need to go and or maybe there is a cost arbitrage. You have like a really major cost difference between you delivering and the vendor delivering. Okay, or maybe you don't have this initiative is so complex and critical that you are not able to deliver, or you don't have the skill set within the organization. So there are three. So there are so normally as business analysts, right, we prepare three different artifacts. I mean, not directly. We involve a lot with the pre-sales team. Okay, so but we contribute a lot into the requirements. So the major document that we prepare here is RFP. Okay, so request for proposals. We looked at this template when we were going through the BA templates. But so there are few more things that you need to aware. So you need to be aware of RFQ and RFI as well. So this is request for quote and request for information. A request for quote is when you ask different vendors to give you quotation on the cost. Request for information is when you're asking information from the vendors. So that's when you give an RFI. But the main question that you'll be asked in the interview, right? So how do you assess vendors and decide who's the best vendor? Okay, so what factors would you consider? Okay, so that's the major question that can be asked in the interviews. So we look at the first thing that we look at the knowledge and expertise of the vendors. Okay, so a common reason why we use a third party vendor is because they have more knowledge and expertise that is not available within the organization, right? So we look at what is the knowledge and expertise of each of these vendors and then take a decision. The second thing that we look at is licensing and pricing models. Okay, so licensing and pricing models, for example, let's say we are into a system where let's say, for example, we are into a system where we are booking trades. Okay, so number of transactions, and the vendor will say, I will charge you like 1 million. Maybe I'll charge you like $20 per transaction. Okay, so one vendor will say this, and the other vendor will say, I will charge you like, $100 per user, for example. So let's say if you do like 1 million transactions in a day, but these 1 million transactions are performed by like maybe 5 users. Okay, so 5 users are monitoring the application for these 1 million transactions. So which vendor are you likely to choose? The vendor who's giving you pricing based on the number of users, right? Or because obviously you have less users, it will be more viable. But a vendor who's giving pricing based on the transactions is more expensive. So you won't go with that, right? And also licensing. So for example, one vendor is saying, okay, so you have to buy license at least for 5 years. Okay. Another vendor is saying you have to buy, I'm flexible. You can buy for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. So you will decide based on the licensing and pricing models as well. Okay. The third factor we look at is what is the vendor's market position. And then you compare their market position. So for example, let's say if you float out a tender to on software development. Okay, so let's say TCS is one of the vendors, and then you have a startup, a less known startup. Okay, so given everything else remaining same, you would obviously prefer the company like TCS, right? Because they have a better market position. So that's another factor that we look at. Okay, so the other thing that we look at is terms and conditions. Terms and conditions like that includes like intellectual property rights. For example, if a vendor is saying anything that we develop for you should not be reused internally, and we will be owning the source code and the ownership rights. Okay, and the other vendor is saying so you're free to use internally, and the source code or the what we develop for you will be yours. Okay, like after 3 years. So that's also another important criteria, right? So so vendor experience, reputation, and stability is also another criteria. So you look at each of these parameters when you assess the vendors. Okay, so people will ask you what are the different things you will consider when you evaluate vendors. So you can give all these examples. So knowledge and expertise, license and pricing models, vendors market position, terms and conditions, and vendors experience, reputation, and stability. Just a second. Oh, I think we are.
And Ravi, what is the difference between RFP and RFI?
RFP is so we document the requirements and then we ask them for a proposal. Okay, so where they give available, not available, and then we'll develop with customization, right? And whereas RFI is when you're just asking for additional information, so you can use RFI. So you can, so let's say you want to get a product, you just wanted additional information from different vendors, so you can float an RFI that time.
So the vendor would be same, right?
Yeah, so you will be floating it to like multiple vendors. Yeah, so it could be the same vendor where you create like 2 different documents.
Okay, so
So
if we consider,
RFI is to gather like more context. RFP is where you give your requirements after you understand the product more. Okay, so we actually have 3 more techniques, probably which we'll cover tomorrow, and then we'll also look at how we can map these techniques and what technique can we use at what stage. Okay, so that would be more like a template which you can use as a reference. I'll be sharing the templates with you. So whenever you have a different phase of SDLC going on, right, you can look up what are the suitable techniques that you can use. Okay, so this is again something that I've created where you can map like different SDLC tasks into BA techniques. Okay, so it's a simple spreadsheet which you can look up. Okay, so probably we can call it a day if there are no questions on what we discussed.
So, Ravi, I have a query. If I differentiate this RFP, RFQ, and RFI, so it's like first we go for an information, that is RFI, then we understand the product and ask for a proposal. And once that is done, then the RFQ, that is a detailed specification, and as per the requirement, and then which is for a quotation.
Yeah, correct.
So RFI, then RFP, then RFQ.
Yeah, that's right. So, but mostly, this sequence is not followed. We directly jump into RFP.
Yeah.
Okay, so
RFP.
yeah.
Now, because normally we don't hear that RFI.
RFI, RFQ is not very popular, but I'm just introducing you to this concept because sometimes you may hear some organizations which follow process like Six Sigma, right? They may use it. Okay, but in
No,
generally,
we see in our company means G also follows Six Sigma. They have their own year. But the thing is, people doesn't have currently, they don't have time for information. They directly go for proposals.
yeah, correct. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay, fine then. If there are no more questions, we can call it a day. So tomorrow we'll continue with the remaining three techniques and then mapping.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Ravi, I have a question, Ravi. Sorry.
Yeah.
Ravi, is this technique is beneficiary because what?
Yeah. Hello. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, Ravi.
Yes.
Has he dropped off or what? Anyway, I think I'll talk to him separately.